Welcome to Ask Pastor Tim with your host, Tim Jones, Kingdom Ambassador, Spiritual Advisor, and Purpose Advocate. We're here to present wisdom, knowledge, and understanding on important topics through conversations that matter. Our goal is to answer your questions about purpose, destiny, relationships, mental and emotional wealth, human potential, and many other important subjects. We invite you to ask a question, share a thought, or suggest a topic for us to address. Follow us at Getting Clear with Tim Jones on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And don't forget to kindly like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ask Pastor Tim. Welcome to the 30th episode of Ask Pastor Tim. I'm your host, Tim Jones. I have with me tonight my wonderful and beautiful daughter, Jewel Jones, Jewel D. Jones. And we are going to be having a lively conversation tonight, centering around the music industry and some of the tricky traps that I like to call them that exist in the industry. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that tonight. I want to go ahead and invite you to follow us on Instagram, Getting Clear, on Facebook, Tim Jones, or Getting Clear with Tim Jones on Facebook, and on YouTube, Getting Clear with Tim Jones on YouTube. Any of the Ask Pastor Tim episodes, in fact, all of the Ask Pastor Tim episodes live on Getting Clear with Tim Jones on YouTube. So go there and subscribe to our channel so that you can see all of the stuff that we're doing, and so that you can know when we are releasing new videos and new material. So again, thank you for joining, those who are on and those who will come on. So very excited about tonight a little bit. I'm excited about all of our episodes because we make an effort to really dig into conversations from the place of truth, and not just our reality, but the truth, and you have to search for that sometimes outside of your reality. And that's what we come on here to do. That's what we set our hearts and our minds to do. And so we get excited about every opportunity we have to talk about what's going on in our world right now. Happy New Year to all of those that I haven't had an opportunity to say Happy New Year to you. I said last week that we are making the conscious attempt, the conscious effort to make sure that this year is not just a leap year, but it is the leap year for us, meaning that we are very intentional about doing some things, releasing some things, stopping some things, starting some things, just real intentional about what we're doing this year, and have determined that this will be the leap year, that some of the things that maybe have been on the shelf come off the shelf. Some of the things that haven't completed, they get completed, that kind of year. So I hope that you've made that same kind of decision to make this the leap year for you. So we're about ready to jump into our topic here. Again, we're going to be talking about the tricky traps in the music industry and how they are affecting artists, and with an emphasis or special attention to Christian artists. Why? Because we're Christians. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. Tag someone that you know is a musician, is an artist in any form. It doesn't just have to be in the music industry. If you've been listening to me, I've been talking about emerging leaders and been talking about creative artists, because I believe that in this season that the arts will carry, the arts have an opportunity to carry a voice, to carry not just a sound, but a voice that will speak to generations Yeah, I did say generations with an S, and help to reshape our consciousness. If you um, paying attention to anything, you know the world is crazy right now. You know that, Joe, the world is crazy right now.
Mm.
People have lost their minds, literally. You know, people, period. And then the church. Oh my goodness, the church has gone crazy. We talking about each other and backbiting each other and putting each other on blast and calling each other out. And it's like, what in the world is going on with the church of Jesus Christ? What's wrong with these people? And so, yeah, we are in a time when we really have to focus and hone in on the truth and not allow ourselves to be pulled into the crazy that's going on in our world right now. So that's what we're here to do. I want to invite you, please ask questions, put questions, comments in the chat. You can do that either on Facebook, you can do that on Instagram. Can't do it on YouTube at this point, but you can do it on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, comment, ask questions. Yeah, join the conversation with us here as we talk about this. Joel, you want to give a little introduction?
What?
Of yourself.
No.
Hi, I'm Joel.
Yep, I'm Jewel. I don't really know what else to say. Pastor Tim's daughter. Yeah, you said all the stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Jewel and her siblings were raised in a home that where worship was not just a vital part of everything that we did, but it's our lifeline, man. That's how we got through stuff, right? That's how we dealt with stuff. You know, that's how we faced adversity. That's how we rejoiced in triumph. Worship, that has been the fundamental basis for it. And a little bit about what, as we are discussing this topic tonight, we're doing it from the standpoint of understanding what our true purpose is in worship, understanding what, particularly as Christians, what our real, here's that word, call is as it concerns music, as it concerns the music industry, as it concerns the world, period. And I'll say some things about the compartmentalization of it and how the compartmentalization of it just really shows how we don't understand what we've really been called to. So I don't want to get into that too soon. We want to walk our way up to that. But Jewel, I mean, you know, some of the opportunities that you've had, some of the experiences that you've had as it concerns, you know, growing up in a house where there was worship, what did that communicate to you? How did that affect you growing up in your high school years? And now that you are an adult, you know, how has worship, how has growing up in a home where that was a centerpiece, how has that impacted your life? Let's start there.
How has it impacted my life? I mean, obviously, it's something that's, I guess, intertwined into everything for me. Like you said, growing up, it was something that we always did. It was part of, like, you know, our culture as a family and our identity as a family, who we were. So it was a natural thing for me to, you know, want to do that a little bit more as I matured in my own walk. I think that, I don't know, I don't think I was very aware of what it meant to me while it was happening. It was just normal. It was regular. It was another thing. And I didn't realize, I guess, how the authenticity and the authenticity and just some of the principles that we were being taught, I didn't notice how they would really shape kind of like who I am now. And I didn't notice also that they weren't always common for everybody else. So yeah, I think in a lot of different ways, I just didn't realize that this is not just like a regular thing. You know, sometimes when we were younger, we didn't necessarily want to sing or we didn't, you know, Yeah, we didn't want to, but growing up, you know, me and my siblings have conversations now about what it was then and how we appreciate some of those moments, and you know, they were staples in our life now that we're older. But yeah, I don't know if I have a full picture of exactly how it affected my life, but I know that it has shaped me for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As it concerns, you know, singing, you've had an opportunity to work with some, you know, with some people, and you've had an opportunity to be on certain stages. How do you feel, you know, what your background growing up and in that environment? How do you feel that helped you to adapt to some of the stages that you're on now?
I think I was always encouraged to approach it not as I was always encouraged to approach it not so much as a stage, that you all just always encouraged our authentic expression. So I never felt like I was like performing, if that makes sense. I think that it prepared me in the sense that a lot of things are quick and fast paced and change a lot. And so, you know, that's kind of something that I was already used to, you know, learning things quickly, spontaneously. Yeah. Let's see what else. Yeah, I'd say those are probably the main things. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you something to pull on an experience, because I'm kind of looking for, you know, everyone has defining moments, and you know, everyone has that point when what was common to them, they had an opportunity to see it in a different light or in a different way, or you know, talk about the time when we went to Tallahassee, and it was you guys' first time back at our old church in Tallahassee. As well, you guys are still teenagers, or were you adults then?
No, we were adults.
You were adults then. Yeah. So as adults, because when we left Tallahassee, you guys were like 5 and 6 or something like that. Yeah. So and your memories, you had some, but they were, you know, not many, and so this was the first time that you really got to go back and experience where it all started, you know, with your mom and I. Talk about that a little bit and how that impacted you and your siblings.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we were 5 and 6, so we really don't have many memories, if any, of being at that church. But obviously you guys do, you know, and, you know, pulled a lot of things. And I think the biggest thing is, as siblings, we were talking about how everything kind of made sense. There was like connecting moments for us. It was like you felt like this was a part of your DNA, even though you had never been there before. So it was very much like home. It made sense as far as, like I said, the way you guys raised us, what we had learned, come to know about worship. And then it helped kind of expand that a little bit more, in the sense that we kind of, we were just able to see where a lot of what you guys taught us came from. I think also realizing what a unique environment that was. Like, we had been in great environments. You guys always, you know, were very particular about where we were, and, you know, the environment that we would have, you know, as far as church growing up. But I don't know, we really just saw how unique that environment was, how that wasn't something that is everywhere. It was very special. It was defining in the sense that, like I said, it just felt like this was like a part of you. And again, we don't have any actual core memories of that place, but yet it is part of us as well. And so I thought that was really cool, because what a great impact must that environment have had to affect people that had no memory of actually being there and really weren't there for long, you know, to say that we were actually cultivated in it. But for you all to be able to have grabbed onto it so much so that years and years later, you're able to cultivate an environment that still feels like that for your children. And so, yeah, I think, it felt like home. It felt like things were connecting, pieces were connecting as far as our worship experiences.
Yeah, it was so interesting because your mom and I, we were obviously we were excited about going back and seeing friends and family, but we were excited about you guys going back. It was kind of like, see, now you will see, that we're just not weird. And if we are, there are a lot of weird people like us. There are a lot of people who are this serious about this thing. Not just doing church, because you can see a lot of people who do church. And it's easy to do church and look. It's easy to do church and look authentic. Right. It's just easy to do that today, especially if you have a gift, if you have a level of skill. We've seen, professional musicians, in the church and what that looks like. And I'm not knocking one thing or another. I'm just saying that we've seen that, right? And we've seen musicians that, play here, play there, do this, do that, all over the place. But there's no commitment to growing in the unity of an I don't want to say that, in a unity of a group that God has specifically put his hand on and vested you to be a part of the development of that group. You just come in and provide a service for them. That's a different thing from being a part of something that God is developing and cultivating and giving a unique sound. And so that's the thing, is the sound, the unique sound that we were a part of. And so when you're a part of a unique sound, you carry that sound with you if you have internalized it. And we absolutely internalized it, so that's why it came with us. And then, when we came here to Central Florida, we were looking for that, right? And had a hard time finding it, right? Because it was unique, and so, yeah. So as it concerns, so you had that experience and it reshaped how you saw, what we had been doing and what we had taught you guys to do. And so was there now a difference in the way you handled your gift after that?
I think realizing that it was distinct, realizing that just like you guys had taken what you had grabbed and began to multiply it, first through us and then through the worship team at the church that we were at, and so on and so forth, just realizing in our own way we would have that same type of thing. So whatever area we were called to affect, it was going to be different, and it was going to be unique, it was going to be special in that same way. Like, we were called to take that environment and multiply it, wherever we go, wherever that looks like. And that's not just in a church setting, that's wherever we go, to bring that environment.
To bring that environment. So that began to shape, and then so as you begin to come into your own, I'll say, priesthood, because that's what it becomes when you're no longer relying on someone else for your spiritual growth. You become responsible for your own spiritual growth. That's when you develop a priesthood. And there are people in church, they just go to church, right? And they read the Bible in church, right? But they don't have a priesthood at home, right? So what does that mean? That means that if something happens in the church building, we're no longer able to go to the church building, like what happened with, in 2020. We're no longer able to go to the church building. How does that affect your priesthood? If you don't have a priesthood, there's nothing to impact and nothing to affect. You're not in church, you're not in the word, and there's not only is there no substance, there's no foundation, which means that now, man, you're in trouble, really, if you don't have a foundation. And so church begins to give you a foundation, but it's not just church. You have to build your own priesthood, which means that you have to come into your own, to understand your gift, right? Understand, first of all, that it's not yours.
Right.
It was given to you, right? And you have a responsibility to carry it, to develop it, and to distribute it, here in the earth, in this time and space. And that is, it is both a privilege and a burden at the same time, And so when you start to gain a sense of both the privilege and the burden, it causes you to walk a certain way and to handle yourself a certain way and to handle your gift a certain way, And so all of that I've just described there is a part of holiness. Okay. Because holiness deals with being set apart. Okay. Which means that I can't do everything. I can't do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I can't do like everybody else. I can't allow my appetites or my attitudes to be like everybody else's. I have to do this differently. I have to handle this differently. And so that's where holiness begins, right there, with personal responsibility for what you're carrying. Right? Without that personal response, anybody who's listening, I almost feel like I'm preaching now, but if you want to write something down, write that down. Holiness begins with a personal responsibility for what you are carrying. If you do not rightly discern what you are carrying, you really don't have the basis for a holy life or a holy walk. Because even if you try to do that, you're gonna be doing it in the flesh, right? And we all know where that leads. You trying to carry out something spiritual in the flesh. Well, that's just a train wreck waiting to happen. No, the Bible tells us God says to be holy because He's holy, right? So it doesn't demand us to be something that we're not. So if we are that already because that's what He is, then, there has to be a recognition or an awareness of that truth and then an embracing of it. And where there's no awareness of it, number one, and certainly where there's no embracing of it, number two, is where you have performance.
Yes.
People that have gifts and they have talent, and gifts and talents are without repentance. Okay. You don't have to be saved to have a gift or a talent. My belief is that in order to be born in the world, into the earth, in order to come into the earth, God had to give you some kind of resources for your potential. He had to give you something to work with in the earth. So everybody's got something. I know there's some people that think they don't. What's your gift or what's your talent? I don't really have any. That's not true. You do. You may not know what they are, but you have some, because God gives everybody something to work with. And so when holiness begins with recognizing what it is that God is giving you to work with, and recognizing that this is not just any old bag of potato chips. This is a special, unique thing that He's put on the inside of me. I don't care how plain it seems, it's not plain because it has God's handprint on it and has your fingerprint. Think about it. It's God's handprint and your fingerprint. Your fingerprint is unlike any other ever has been, ever will be. I still think people sleep on that a lot, right? Never has been one and never will be one like yours. It's the only one, which is evidence and proof that we are carrying a part of God that nobody else is carrying, right? So if you're carrying a part of God, the creator of the universe, oh my goodness, that should make you be circumspect about your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own activities, your own attitudes, what you choose to do, what you choose not to do, where you choose to go, where you choose not to go. So I'm going to ask you this question now. With all of that I just said, right? How important, or let me see how I want to ask this. The word freedom, okay? So a lot of people, we want to be free. Everyone wants to be free. And as it concerns the church and as it concerns Christians who have a propensity for spiritual life, or they know that that's who they are and they've given themselves to whatever degree to that, have seen things in the past or have seen others or maybe their parents or someone else who were operating in a religious setting, and they didn't like what they saw.
Mhm.
They didn't like what they saw. They didn't like what they heard. They felt like that wasn't them, and that felt like bondage to them. So now they didn't want to leave God per se, but they also don't want the bondage that they've seen that comes with it, right? So then the word freedom comes in. How do you define that when you've had a background that, none of our backgrounds are perfect. There's no perfect people. So the holiest person you've ever known they were not perfect, right? They had flaws. So you're always going to have that. But how do you take freedom and apply it to your life to separate you from that, okay, without going too far or crossing a line or even abandoning holiness?
I think a lot of it depends on where your relationship lied in the first place. If you have your own individual relationship, then you may do something different with what you've experienced and seen than, if a lot of what you were going off of was based on what you experienced or seen. So I think part of it is many times maybe you were in a space where church was just somewhere you went, worship was just something that you did. Like you said, we only read the Bible when we were in church. We only really worshiped when we were in church and in those spaces, in those corporate settings, and really wouldn't know how to create that type of environment in my room alone. When you're in that space, I think it kind of detaches you in a way that when you detach yourself from that which you've seen and experienced, well, you didn't have anything else outside of that. So freedom looks like really any and everything. It really doesn't have any boundaries. It really doesn't have any structure to it. And the definition of freedom in a lot of people's mind doesn't really have boundaries or structure to it. I think it does mean do what feels best and what you think is best for you, and if it's not serving you, you should leave. There's that, those type of thoughts and things that are being spewed out, those ideas. If you didn't have anything outside of those environments in the first place, you don't really have anywhere to go.
Right.
That's going to actually be beneficial. If you do have something outside of those, I think it looks like, because I went through this process myself, asking yourself why you do believe what you believe. It looks like unlearning some things that maybe you thought were God, but really it was religion, or really it was tradition, or really it was, the person that you thought was super spiritual. It was their habits, but that's like, okay, but that doesn't mean that's what I have to do. I don't necessarily have to wake up at 4 every morning. What making those things law, it looks like deconstructing those ideas and going to God about what to add back in. And so, when you're in those spaces and you weren't already accustomed to creating spaces and creating a relationship outside of church environments or conferences or whatever else, it's easy to fall into a space of doing any and everything, and for sure outside of holiness.
I like what you said, deconstructing those ideas. And sometimes we don't recognize that our ideas need deconstructing because we fall in love with our own ideas, right?
Sure.
And when you fall in love with your own ideas, you have made your ideas an ideal. And to make your ideas an ideal, it means that your belief is that everyone should have the same ideas that I have.
Mhm.
And nothing wrong with believing that internally, but when you make it an ideal, you tend to live like everyone's should live like you. Or in other words, you present yourself and approach people, or I'll just say present yourself. You present yourself in a way that that's what comes off of you.
Mhm.
And that's where you've heard this before, the holier than thou, right? Yep. I used to hate when people said that. Oh, you think you holier than thou? It's like, you shouldn't want to be. You know what I'm saying? But I understood what they were saying. But that's what comes off of you, even if you have pure intentions, right? Even if your intentions are pure, but you can still portray something that's impure. And you say, well, how in the world can you do that when we're not consciously aware, and being willing to deconstruct our ideas?
Yeah.
I think that is huge, right? I call it unplugging from your frame of reference, because whatever thoughts we have, whatever framework, holds those thoughts, there is a reference point for that framework. And as long as I'm plugged into that reference point, that framework exists, and everything that I process has to come through that framework, and it's probably going to be processed within that framework. And whatever I see and determine, whatever conclusions I come to, I'll come to them as a result of looking through the lens of that framework. And in order for me to consider something different, I have to unplug from that framework and replug somewhere else to consider, even be able to consider. So I think that's very, very insightful and even prophetic, is to have the consciousness or the awareness to be willing to deconstruct your ideas. I believe that if more people, old and young, were willing to the scrutiny of their own ideas, I believe that we could reason together a lot better. And right now, some of the things that we're seeing is our inability to reason together, Yeah. So I threw this term out there, the tricky traps. I've been talking about tricky traps for probably a few years now. And there are a lot of tricky traps, but there are three that I deal with specifically. And I believe that they are applicable regardless of what genre, what mountain. I think they're applicable, right? So I want to deal with the first one, and ask your input on how you see that affecting people. If it's ever affected you, is it something you see that's widespread or just a few? And that's the fit-in trap. Okay. The fit-in trap is pretty much just what it says. Okay. It's the desire to fit in with others. Oh, what's wrong with that? Nothing is wrong with that in and of itself, unless you're trying to fit into the wrong place. That happens, right? Okay. Sometimes we try and fit into places that we're not supposed to fit into. It's the difference between form and flow. Form, I have to conform, make myself fit. I have to change something about myself. I have to do something different I have to do something different with who I am in order for me to fit. Flow is, I found this place, I found this group, I found these friends, I found these people, I found this church, I found this job, whatever. And my core abilities, my core, who I am as a person and how I am, flows with this group. Two different things, right? Okay. So how do you see that in terms of what you've seen and experienced? Because we're talking about the creative arts and music industry. How have you talk about what you've seen in that regard?
I think it's kind of hard to speak on that for anyone outside of myself, because I don't know if somebody else is contorting themselves or not. I do know that a lot of things look the same concerning, like, whether it's the trying to see how to say, the type of music that's made, the words, the way we exhort, in the way that a lot of things sound and look the same, in the sense that it feels like everybody's kind of doing the same thing. And if you're not, you may stand out. So in that sense, it's not hard to imagine people feeling like they have to be in that same vein and have to be kind of doing and looking the same way, right?
Yeah.
You want to, industry wise, you want to do what's already working. So
right.
the part of it that
right.
is industry is, yes, it's Christian, yes, it's gospel, and there's that side of it. But then the industry side is to do things that sell, to do things that work, to do things that capture people's attention. And so you have to imagine that there are aspects where, and this is what I can speak to specifically, when I think of fitting, I think of not so much conforming in the sense of compromising, but I think of making myself smaller, or making myself smaller, less of what I know I'm supposed to be, because I want to make sure it's palatable, or I want to make sure it's received well, or I want to make sure it does well based on what's doing well right now. Those type of things. When I think of fit, I think from what I've seen, I think it's just doing what's already out there now in order to sell and do well and be in certain spaces. I think anybody who you can see is in a flow naturally stands out. Everybody has their own uniqueness. I don't think we should all sound the same. I don't think, we should all be doing the same runs and all be doing the same, even in that sense.
Yeah.
I think there is a uniqueness, and those who are willing to be unique and willing to, there's details and ins and outs that I will never know, and certain people you probably will never know until you get into very deep spaces but even just in the very beginning of where I'm at, seeing that there are clearly those who decide not to make certain decisions and decide to take certain stances, whatever that may be, who are making a great impact in the sense of their audience, I guess, in their area, what they're supposed to impact. But they'll probably never win an award, or they'll probably never, there's certain things that they will never do because they're gonna stand out in their uniqueness, and you recognize them and you respect them for that. But maybe you don't realize that that's exactly what they're doing. That they're deciding to do what it is God says, even if it doesn't make sense with money, or it doesn't make sense with what the industry is doing right now, or things like that. So those are just some of the things that come to mind when it comes to like fitting versus flowing and being who you are uniquely. I think it is probably for anybody. It can be scary to flow and be who you are uniquely if you don't see anybody else doing it. And this industry has been there way before you. Whoever you probably have on your team are probably experienced. Whoever, is your manager, whoever's advising you in certain areas, whatever friends you have who may already be in certain spaces that you desire to be in, will tell you certain things and give you certain advice based on what they've seen and based on, how to play a certain game. It's an industry, it's a game in some sense. And so, it takes courage to be able to say, well, that none of that is me, and just be uniquely who God has called you to be. Figure out what that looks like, first of all.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you can just know what isn't you and not necessarily know what it's going to look like for you, because you haven't seen it. It hasn't been done before.
Right.
And so, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think, those are just some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, those are the type of artists that I'm drawn to,
Mhm.
is those who have determined that they're not going to be like everybody else,
Mhm.
right? And you know, I'll speak to it. You know, I can see clearly those that, because there's a sound.
Mhm.
There's a sound, and you know when is you know when someone is imitating someone else's sound.
Mhm.
You know that, right? Um, takes no, you know, not to say about someone's gift. I remember when we were in FAMU Gospel Choir. Well, actually, we were no longer in FAMU Gospel Choir. We graduated from there, and but we still went to a lot of the functions. We were still involved with the choir. The choir was a big part of, you know, that's where we met. Mom and I met. And I remember this young man. We went to one of the gospel choir functions. One of the it wasn't a concert, but they were singing at this particular church, and we went, right, to support them and, you know, just hear them. And this young man who was he was one of the directors of the choir at that time, and he sang this Daryl Coley. You remember Daryl Coley?
Mhm.
No.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. If any of you know Daryl Coley, if you never heard Daryl Coley before, look him up on YouTube and listen to some of his stuff.
I'm sure you should.
Just an amazing vocalist, right? And they were singing this Daryl Coley song called Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Daryl Coley is this guy sang the song exactly like Daryl Coley. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to make sure I communicate this properly. When I say exactly, I mean exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He sounded exactly like him. He did every run exactly like him. His mannerisms were exactly like him. It was almost scary to see how good he was at imitating somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I was, my goodness, that boy is good, but he's good at imitating.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I will never forget that, because it impacted me so. I'd never seen anyone imitate someone to that degree, with that degree of excellence. I mean, it was outstanding, you know. And Daryl Coley is not an easy singer to imitate, you know. And I will never forget that, how it, you know, I saw that young man different every time from that point, because I thought, man, this kid does not know who he is, right? And just the potential of the gift that he had, you know, boy, just amazing, amazing. So I said that to say that, you know, yes, it is very easy to get lost in that game, like you say, and find ourselves becoming trapped in that fit in cycle, and never really come into the potential, not to even mention fulfill it. Because your real potential, you really only come into your real potential when you start doing what you were created to do. Mm-hmm. Everything outside of that is just a rehearsal. You're practicing for that time, for that moment. Your real potential, because that's what your potential is for. It's primarily for whatever you came into the earth for, whatever you came here to do. So when you step into that moment, now your potential really kicks in, and you can now grow that. Yeah. And so, yes, it becomes very, very, very easy. Now, you talked about, you know, the industry side, right? And then obviously for a Christian, you know, it's the why am I doing this side, you know? And that's what I talked about earlier, where holiness begins is, first of all, recognizing that what you're carrying is not your own, right? And then, you know, having an awareness of what this is, the value. You got to have some kind of valuation process that you go on within yourself, where you can not undervalue, but really begin that what you're carrying, or rather begin to see that what you're carrying is actually priceless, and begin to treat it that way. That's where holiness begins. So if you get caught in that fit in trap, trying to make sure that you hit this mark and hit that mark, all in the industry, while at the same time you're missing marks in your personal purpose for being here on the earth, that's textbook fit in trap. You see what I'm saying? And so my question is simple: have you seen people in that place?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the next one, because that one right there, I could talk about that one for a long time. Right, so that's the fit in trap. Then there's the trust fall trap. It's pretty much what it is, right? What it says, right? So in industry, there are those who've gone before you, right? You talked about a manager or a mentor or someone on your team who's been there, done that, got more experience than you, right? And so we have to find, or we look for people that we can follow or use as guides or trust to give us direction or instruction and even correction. We look for those types of people because we don't know, and they have a knowledge that we don't have. So if we need that knowledge, we have to enter into some kind of relationship with them and begin to glean from them if that's feasible. What happens though when, because that person, okay, has not rightly discerned what they're carrying, and so that means that they're not going to rightly discern what you're carrying, which simply means that they're misusing or mishandling themselves, so they're going to mishandle everything and everybody else too. When that person, okay, is a person who is so industry successful driven at their core that they're willing to not just sacrifice, but they're willing to burn bridges. I'll go right to that one: burn bridges. In other words, they're willing to do things that compromise other people for the sake of how it looks or how it seems or the success of it, or industry stuff, industry standard stuff. What happens when you get connected or hooked up with someone and then that person disappoints you? Right? That person disappoints you, and now you're still lost. Right? It's the old thing of, the trust fall. Close your eyes, hands across your shoulder, and fall backwards. Look back to see if somebody's back there to catch you. They're back there, but you still, your heart's fluttering, and because you don't know if they're gonna fall, if they're gonna catch you or not. You don't know who to trust, and if you allow that person, well, let me put it in the question: how can you guard yourself from the trust fall hurt?
So meaning like putting, can you say it one more time? Like what that is?
Yeah. So someone who is in a position to mentor you, let's just use some terminology that we can, sink in the ground, to mentor you. That mentor, okay, they will mentor you, but even in their mentoring you, they care more about their own advancement than they do your advancement.
Okay.
And so it causes them to make choices or decisions that may put you in a certain light or may not be to your best advantage. In other words, they may use you. Okay. Instead of trying to support you, they end up using you. And that causes you to be hurt, and it causes you to fall backwards, and nobody's there to catch you. How do you guard yourself from that?
I don't really know how to answer that. Um, hmm. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's the answer that the only thing that comes to mind is just the fact that, I mean, we can't really put our full trust in any man. Like, the people are gonna fail us. So I can't. I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding the question, but I.
Let me help you a little bit.
Mhm.
If you are going to guard yourself
Mhm.
from that kind of circumstance or situation, when would you do it? If you were going to do something to guard yourself against that, when would that happen?
I'm not sure.
It's obvious.
Um,
Okay, you got before you know the person, you got
Mhm.
at the beginning of the when you first met the person, then you got after you got into a relationship, and then you got when they break your heart or break your trust.
mhm. Um, I guess, I mean, seeing their fruit before you even get into the relationship.
Okay,
Uh, yeah.
that's really the only time that you could,
Mhm.
because afterwards it's too late.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The only time that you could is beforehand, which means that you have to use what word that starts with a D?
Discernment.
Discernment.
Mhm.
You have to use discernment. You have to have it and use it and not allow your head to take you somewhere that will jeopardize or compromise your heart.
Mhm.
Your head says that, man, this guy's well known,
Mhm.
he's been around, he has a certain level of status, he can help me. That's head.
Mhm.
But heart might be saying, I don't really like the way he spoke to her.
Mhm. Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying? And so you can go with the head
Mhm.
if you want to. That could very well land you in a place where you're right in the middle of the trust fall trap.
Okay.
Trusted somebody that you should never have trusted because you went with your head and not your heart. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's how you get into that trust fall. There are other ways to get into it, but that's like probably one of the most common ways to get into it right there, especially as it concerns, needing, wanting, mentors that will help and guide you along the way in an industry like the music industry where there's, all kinds of people with all kinds of motives. You want to know that, whoever you're connecting with is somebody that you can trust and so that discernment is huge,
Mhm.
right? So if you don't have it, man, you become a real viable candidate for this trap without discernment. Yeah. You seen that?
I'm not sure.
Whether whether you well, I was gonna say whether personally or
Mhm.
whether firsthand or secondhand,
Mhm.
um, I've seen it,
Mhm.
right? And what discernment will do is give you the eyes to see it happening to somebody else. And then that gives you forewarning,
Mhm.
right? That gives you the forewarning to the traffic signal, right? The flashing light, you know, um, or like wife likes to say, the red flags. That gives you the red flags, but if you ignore them, you're most likely going to end up in a victim of the trust fall trap. Okay. So those are only two that we'll talk about tonight. There's one more. That one's a little more in depth, but I think those two are, they're pretty easy to recognize.
Okay.
So for someone who um, is in this industry, you know that there's a call on your life. You're not just gifted, but God has specifically called you into using your gift and either being on someone else's platform or eventually having your own platform, whatever that might feel like and seem like to you, but there's a sense of it in your heart. Can I say to you, encourage you to develop discernment? Don't sleep on your priesthood. You must build your personal relationship with God. Now, let me tell you what that means. That means that you must exercise the muscle of prayer, meditating, reading the word, right? Worshiping. You must exercise that muscle, not just when you go to church, right? You've got to have priesthood. You can't build a priesthood at church. You build a priesthood at home, right? When you go to church, that should be a demonstration of whatever has been happening in your life already. So it's not a performance. This is who I am. Follow me and you watch and see, right? So you have to build your priesthood. If you don't build your priesthood, you will not develop the ability to discern spirits or discern personalities or discern even intentions, right? The Holy Spirit will give you a discerning of the Holy Spirit will give you the ability to discern when somebody's attitude is not right. Right? It give you can hear the way someone speaks to someone, and they may have said something in a nice way, but you heard the attitude in it. That's the Holy Spirit that will give you insight like that. Develop that ability to hear from God and your ability to discern spirits so that you don't fall into this fit-in trap or that trust fall trap, but so that you can stay connected to the one who gave you the gift. You have to stay connected. And when I say connected, I'm not just talking about leaning up against. Lean up against. No, you must be connected. You must be joined. You must be plugged into the one who gave you the gift. And your motivation must be him. He must be your motivation. And we all want to be successful. And we're all called to be successful. But we have to, like Jewel said, deconstruct our idea of what successful is for us. Because what makes one person successful doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be successful for someone else. You need to know what success is for you if you're going to avoid the tricky traps of the music industry. I hope this helped someone. You can certainly reach out to me for further conversation or even more clarity about these traps. I've got some in-depth information about these particular traps, and these traps don't just exist in the music industry. They exist in because they deal with people, and that's how we are as people. Everybody wants to fit in. Nobody wants to stand out, right? Everyone needs someone that they can trust. Okay, that's a part of how we navigate life. Is building relationships, having people who are in places that can help us get to those places, and that kind of thing. So we need, relationships, and we need, to be able to fit in. We just don't want to get trapped into situations that do us more harm than they do us good. My mother used to say this, and I'm sure many of your mothers and fathers probably said it. Everything that looks like gold ain't gold, right? So use your discernment, right? And let the Lord lead and guide you. Truly lead and guide you. If you do that, you will absolutely be successful in whatever the endeavor is. Whatever platform God wants you on, he'll make sure you get to that platform, because here's the deal. It's really not about you. It's about what you're carrying. And in order for what you're carrying to get to where it needs to be, God has to make sure you get there first. All right. So thank you again for watching us. Julia, any closing thoughts for you?
Um, no, I don't think so. No.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I know I asked you some hard questions, but
Mhm.
I think it's, well, I know it's necessary. And, you know, as your mentor, as your dad, part of my job is to make sure that you think about things that you may not think about until someone brings it to your attention. So I bring certain things to your attention so that you can start talking about it, because if you start talking about it, then you're going to be thinking about it. And then when you go into circumstances and situations and you see certain things,
Mhm.
right, the Holy Spirit will remind you, right, of conversations like this, and kick into your discernment so
Mhm.
that you can see um, who's safe for you and who's not safe for you.
Right.
That's very important. So thank you again. I'm going to go ahead with the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, as I always do, encouraging you to live full so that you can die empty. You want to make sure that you are finished when you finish. Thank you again. Good night, everyone. Blessings to you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.